Although Star Wars tends to focus on major intersecting character stories, one of my favorite parts of Star Wars media is when we get a glimpse into the daily life of people in the galaxy beyond our usual protagonists, or their view of events. In this video, we're going to talk about the broader galactic view of Anakin Skywalker, and how Darth Vader was seen, especially after his death. Because it is such a rarely explored area, this is going to be a bit less conclusive than a lot of other video topics, but I still think it's an interesting topic to look at what's available. I'm sure I'll have missed some references, so if there's other tidbits you've found, please leave them in the comments, I'd love to hear them. I would also like to do a similar video for the new canon as well, especially with how, up to this point, the sequel trilogy has had a pretty big focus on this kind of thing. Today we're just going to be talking about Legends though. We as the audience get a pretty full view of Anakin's journey to become Darth Vader, and his turn away from the dark side and redemption. I do have some problems with how Star Wars handles the idea of redemption, to be honest, but that's a topic for another day. Within the lore of the expanded universe, the spread of information that Vader was the one to kill Palpatine, not Luke, was not immediate or even necessarily complete. Even for people that heard about Vader's ultimate turn, the idea that Vader was suddenly a hero or a good person wasn't really accepted very readily. In Truce at Bakura, set essentially immediately after the events at Endor, we get a scene between Leia and Anakin's Force Ghost, where Anakin is confused as to why Luke would forgive, but she wouldn't. Leia finishes the book with very mixed feelings about Anakin, but Luke, while still somewhat hesitant about discussing everything to do with Vader being his father, is at least insistent on making sure people know that it was Vader who killed Palpatine. Even with Luke's attempts to rehabilitate Vader's image, the view within the New Republic, and even parts of the Empire, depending on what propaganda they had access to, remains that he was Imperial. There are two main representations of Vader we get with respect to Vader and the Empire. In Wedge's Gamble, the second book in the X-Wing series, a museum on Coruscant which the Rogue Squadron pilots visit during their operation to infiltrate the planet, depicts Vader as a champion of the Empire and ally of the Emperor through both of their deaths. This exhibit was essentially meant as a propaganda tool for the core worlds to remain loyal. It also presented the Death Star as a mining tool hijacked by the rebels, which Palpatine sacrificed himself to blow up and prevent the rebels from turning into a planet-killing weapon of war. Wedge, despite being one of Luke's closest friends, and therefore you would think one of the people best positioned to have heard Luke's take, basically says the exhibit was at least right about the fact that Vader was thoroughly Imperial. The other view we get of Vader is best laid out by Matthew Stover's Luke Skywalker and the Shadows of Mindor book. This view is primarily held by the military, although it's also disseminated to the population of loyal Imperial worlds soon after Endor through propaganda holofilms, including one named Luke Skywalker and the Jedi's Revenge. This holofilm supported Luke's claim of Vader having turned on the Emperor. Similar to the museum exhibit, this portrayed the Emperor as a sympathetic, self-sacrificing character who had shown Vader kindness by rebuilding him and giving him a place at his side, while Vader was a disloyal coward. According to the holofilm, Palpatine had been trying to rescue Luke Skywalker, son of Jedi hero Anakin Skywalker, from the rebels. This book does represent Vader and Anakin as separate characters in the minds of most of the population, with Anakin being both sympathetic to the Imperials and also dead. It was Vader, going more mad and power-hungry over time, who ruined the Emperor's chance to save Luke, with the point of the film being to set up Luke as the successor to the Emperor and Lord Shadowspawn, the main antagonist of the book, as a decoy Luke taking his place. According to the holofilm, Luke had been so grief-stricken at being unable to save Palpatine that he had gone back to the rebel lies. This is actually not dissimilar from the view we often get from characters within the Imperial fleet, though usually that's less of a propaganda-laden mess. A lot of our window into that comes from the viewpoint of Gilad Pellaeon in the Thrawn trilogy, where he's often comparing Vader's methods with those of Grand Admiral Thrawn. Vader is basically used in the trilogy as a symbol of everything wrong with the Empire's old methods, particularly the waste of life of good officers and crew at the hands of a murder-happy Sith Lord. It does somewhat give the impression that Vader, while feared, was not necessarily respected even at the Empire's height, and looking at the scenes between Vader and other military staff, and governors who were not his direct subordinates in the original trilogy, especially on the Death Star in Episode 4, supports that as well. The last examples I'm going to talk about are from the Fate of the Jedi series, which takes place in the wake of Jacen Solo's fall to the dark side and subsequent defeat, around 40 years after Yavin. There's a significant anti-Jedi sentiment that arises in parts of the government and military, and seemingly in the populace, with a strong desire for accountability. What it actually means to the galaxy for these series of people to have gone to the dark side as Jedi and slaughtered so many people gets addressed a fair bit, and Luke is even exiled until he can find an explanation for the fall of his nephew Jacen. In a conversation with now Chief of State of the Galactic Alliance, Natassi Dalla, who you may recognize as a former Imperial Admiral, she points out that whatever Luke may say about people like Vader and Kyp Durron, who had also blown up a planet, having returned from the dark side, to the public it often just looks like Jedi infighting or acting above the law and beyond consequences, with only their word to show what had actually happened. Luke says this about Dalla's point. She was wrong, and yet she was chiefly wrong from the Jedi perspective. Remove the Force from the equation, and suddenly she became right. That was jarring to Luke. It was so hard for him now to remember what it was like to not have the Force always contributing to his decision-making. The series has a few references to Vader directly, with his family in the Jedi Order being somewhat more sympathetic, but still critical, and with another conversation between Vader's granddaughter, Jaina, and another temporarily fallen Jedi, Tahiri Vela, mentioning Jaina's desire to help Tahiri, being, quote, better than the Darth Vader urge to make the galaxy a better place by destroying everything that doesn't behave. Ultimately, the picture we get of how the galaxy views these characters is that it doesn't matter to them that they returned from the dark side and became servants of the light side after having done these things. For most people, the Force is this impenetrable thing that other Jedi do, and to understand when these characters are themselves, when they're controlled by the dark side or the light, it doesn't change the fact that they still did those things. We get one more relevant bit of Darth Vader's pop culture portrayal in Fate of the Jedi, later in the series where Dalla's crackdown on dissidents within the Galactic Alliance has garnered more criticism. Holoreels criticizing her policies start to include footage of Palpatine, Vader, and Darth Caedus. This highlights that the broader perception of Vader, given the emotions the holoreel is intended to elicit, was still as the Sith Lord and Tyrant, not as Anakin Skywalker, the redeemed Jedi. So despite the fact that he gets to live on in eternity as Hayden Christensen, while Obi-Wan is stuck as a much older Alec Guinness, nothing wrong with that, to the Empire, Vader has become a traitor on top of a butcher. Even in the New Republic and later Galactic Alliance, his turn on the Empire and killing the Emperor had done little to change their view of him. That's the bulk of what I was able to find on how he's talked about and portrayed by other characters, and especially by the galaxy at large. There is a bit of Dark Empire, I believe, that goes into a bit of Palpatine's view of him as a traitor, but that's basically to be expected. He threw him down a shaft. Either way, that's going to do it for today's video. If you have any suggestions for future videos, please leave them in the comments. And for any questions, please use the hashtag QuestionTime for the potential Q&A series. If you've enjoyed, consider leaving a like and subscribing. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time.